are dealing with a capitalist system that is going to ravish human labor for as cheap a cost as it possibly can. So the labor movement needs to fight against that race to the bottom.
The last topic that I want to talk about is on that general topic, right? Because especially when I go on right-wing radio, the hosts are just incredulous that I, as a union leader, support immigrant workers, even undocumented ones, and I don't think that it is good for native-born workers that we have a policy of harassing and indiscriminately targeting undocumented folks. I think that's bad for, obviously, the immigrants, but it's bad for native-born workers. And I'm met with incredulity. And one of the things that they're going to say, as some of these policies get rolled back, they would point to the fact that they would say that it's more that Trump is bending to business pressure, and that is why you should, and that is why unions should support what Trump is doing, because businesses are pressuring Trump to pull back on the immigration stuff. So why should unions also support the business decision, the business position? And so how do you untangle that for people who are good faith in their incredulity? I know a lot of these people are just they're not motivated by good faith. But for the people that are out there that are good faith, that are like curious about like, why do unions support undocumented people? How do you untangle that?
Yeah, I think that's a really big question. So there's one way to untackle it is talking about like political education in our workplaces, educating ourselves on like, what does it mean, if my brother and sister has unsafe working conditions, whose wages are stolen? What does that mean for my working conditions? My working conditions are their working conditions, right? So the argument that many times historically unions have made is that immigrant workers, let's say in the building trades, because the building trades control the supply of labor in order to have leverage with the boss, they say, well, they are taking the job at a lower, pay. They're taking a pay cut and undermining our bargaining power. Well, the answer to that, and we saw this with the drywall workers in California, where, instead of unions saying, we're not going to organize drywall workers, the carpenters are not going to do that. They ended up actually unionizing that workforce and bringing them into the union. So the challenge of the question of immigrant workers undermining the bargaining power of union workers, the answer to that is organizing. Right now, the same argument can be made by a auto worker in Detroit, saying before the big three contract fight, well, the auto worker in Alabama has higher injury rates than a worker in Michigan. So, how do we, is the answer to say, let's exclude those people, let's call them scabs? Or is the answer, let's organize the South? Right? So I think the question is about how do we build power? It's about who are we as a working class? If we believe that we, the working class, must stand up against the bosses who are the ones profiting off our labor and exploiting us, then we need to understand what the primary contradiction is in that dynamic. It is the boss who's hiring people that are undocumented. It is the boss who's exploiting those workers and thereby downgrading our working conditions. So all that immigrant workers are demanding is let's level the playing field. These workers should be legalized. There's no reason why someone that's been working in this country for 25 years, paying for Social Security, doing the labor at home health aides, cleaning grandmas behind, there's no reason why that person should live in conditions of constant fear and abuse. Like, that's just criminal. So the reason why the bosses, are saying lay off the workers is because to that good faith, union person that you're talking to, one of the realities, according to Wells Fargo, is that there's a 700,000 worker shortage in manufacturing alone. Many of these jobs that were being done in Louisville, Kentucky at this appliance park, many of the workers were immigrants. They were starting off at $20 an hour.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
So the reality is that as an economy, as a society, the U.S. has always thrived because these waves of immigrants have been the workforce that has produced growth. So you can see what the opposite of that is, and you can see the stagnation that happened with Japan in the 90s, because those are closed-in societies. So we are dealing with a capitalist system that is going to ravish human labor for as cheap of a cost as it possibly can. So the labor movement needs to raise that standards and be able to fight against that race to the bottom that the business class wants to impose on us. But the bosses do have an interest in sustaining these workers, which is that they need workers. The interest of the labor movement is to organize those workers so they join, the millions of union members that are part of organized labor. Right.
Luis Leon, organizer and associate editor at Labor Notes. You can read his writing at labornotes.org and inthesetimes.com. Luis, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yep. Yeah, fundamentally, when you see undocumented folks, and they're making too little money, or maybe they're making less money than an American worker would take, there are two theoretical solutions to that problem. And the solution that the right lands on is that we need to make this undocumented immigrant's life worse. We need to target them, we need to treat them like a criminal, and we need to deport them. The solution that the left and the labor movement land on is that we should just raise the wages of the undocumented workers. Right? If that is actually your problem, if your problem is not that you hate brown people, then you have two solutions, right? You can kick them out, or you can just raise their wages. You can just organize them so that their wages and working conditions are better. And if you are not actually motivated by racism and xenophobia and bigotry, it seems to me that the obvious answer is the one that lifts up the immigrants as well as the native-born.
Real quick before we pivot, I wanted to lift up a comment from the chat. DL Cindero says, movement of labor is restricted. Movement of capital, it'll go wherever the hell it wants.
Yep.
And I think that is really true. Capital is always eager to find profit wherever that is. And, there is clearly a business interest there because they wouldn't hire these workers if they weren't making a profit. But you're absolutely right. The alternative to this sort of mass deportation, mass violence against people and terror against people, families, is just to treat people with respect, to organize alongside them, and demand better for all of us. And I think there is really a moral issue here at heart. I can make the unionist economic class-based argument as to why we should stand in solidarity, but also there is, bottom line, there's a moral argument. And I just don't know how so many folks, including, many self-professed good Christian folks, can live with that reality that we should terrorize families and, kidnap mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. It's just really obscene.
Yeah.
And, shout out to all of the labor union leaders, members, from the rank and file to the officers, everyone involved who is actually taking a standing in solidarity, as we all should. And so shout out to all of those folks who are doing whatever you can. I know many of our listeners are involved in efforts in their communities, and really, really do appreciate it and commend you for doing the good work.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.